What you're about to watch is an excerpt from the larger all-achievement guide for CK3 that I made just a little while ago. If you're watching this right when the video comes out, then the CK3 all-achievement guide is releasing in just under a week. But if you're watching this in the future, then you can look in the description to find a link to the video. I'm not going to pad out this intro very much longer, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows this is an excerpt from a larger video. If you want to see the whole video, look in the description. Enjoy. Up next, we've got one of the sort of behemoth runs of the all-achievement guide, and that is for 5 of the Iranian Intermezzo, Legacy of Persia, whatever the DLC is called, achievements. We're going to be getting today the Umayyad Strikes Back, which requires you to start as a member of the Umayyad dynasty and hold the Empire of Arabia and the Sunni Caliphate, alongside Abbasid Might, which requires us to take the renewed Caliphate ending in the Iranian Intermezzo struggle. We're also going to be getting Mulct Them Dry, which requires us to loot 4 illustrious tier Vizier extravagance modifiers from the Vizier, alongside Fiscally Responsible, which requires us to fill 5 tax collector slots with excellent aptitude characters, and we'll be finishing it up with Darius Revenge, which requires us to, as a character of Iranian heritage, hold the Empire of Persia, Kingdom of Thessalonica, and Kingdom of Hellas. This run is complicated, to say the least, and it definitely can be weird, and has a lot of RNG, and is quite inconsistent, but when you pull it off, you feel real good. We have a set of contingency plans that we can do if things don't go well. So let's say you're 3 hours into a run and you don't want to throw it away. There's usually backup strategies that I have in mind that I'll explain as I go, so you can still get the run, but it'll just be slower. An optimal run will take about 3.5 hours, but it may take as much as 5 hours. It'll depend on, how your RNG is. The estimate for this run is 3.5 hours to 5 hours, and the RNG presence is medium to high. Let's get into it. We're going to drop in as a Sultan of Al-Andalus, just because they're kind of the most powerful Umayyad character in the game to start, and also because they're one of the only Umayyad characters in 867 that we can play as, since we need to pick 867 for the Iranian Intermezzo. This run is going to mostly consist of a relatively simple playthrough that will get complicated in what actions we do later. We're not going to really focus on Iberia much. We're going to focus on mostly moving our realm over towards the Abbasids. You'll see what I mean soon. We're going to start off by making our dynasty get more towards antagonism, because we're going to do a lot of invasions later in the game. So do that right away. We're also going to try to get out of the Asturias War by either surrendering, so we don't care, or just hoping the claimant dies. In my case, the claimant died, so the war was invalidated. And we're going to focus on enforcing our demands on Toledo, because we want their domain in order to support our country. We already have some of the best domain in Iberia with Cordoba, but Toledo and its surrounding counties are also extremely good, so I highly recommend that you build up these counties. We're not actually going to do a whole lot of conquest from here. We're taking the scholarship focus only because we need to get down to sanction loopholes for the classic buy and claim to the empire that we want to conquer, but beyond that, we actually are going to focus on our domain as this character. Our first Sultan is quite old. It's unlikely that he'll live long enough to possibly do the entire set of achievements. In fact, I would say it's impossible to get everything done as the first character. So we're sort of building up for the long game here. It's completely valid to do nothing to progress towards the achievements in this short period at first, so you can build up your domain and get that all done. It depends on you though. If you feel like you want to start working your way east right away, you totally can. Just be aware that you have to get ready for succession. This is not a run where we can ignore succession, because we will be having many successions this run. What level of development you consider yourself to be comfortable is dependent on you as a player. I like to have maxed out men-at-arms, and I like to have a positive income with maxed court amenities while having those maxed out men-at-arms. The positive income amount doesn't matter that much to me. I just like to know that I can be at war permanently without going into debt. When I have that, that's when I usually feel comfortable going east, but it'll depend on you. Since I'm speedrunning, I sometimes push my luck and try to go even if I don't quite feel ready. If you feel okay playing with less than max men-at-arms and with a little bit of negative income, you go ahead and leave earlier. Since this character's going to die anyway, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that really matters is making sure that you at least live long enough to get to the Sanction Loopholes perk. If you can do that, then we can buy the claims that we need. It's also pretty easy to live that long, considering that the character isn't that old and that you can use the health focus to live a little bit longer. In terms of actually going east, you can county conquest your way to Crete pretty easily by hopping through islands, and then we need to conquer a little piece of Egypt that we can use to get a land border with the Abbasids. It's after we get this border with the Abbasids that the Sanction Loophole button actually becomes important, and funnily enough, we're actually not going to just be claiming the Arabian Empire so simply. We're instead going to be taking just Baghdad and the region around there. As a clan, we can always declare duchy wars for pretty much anywhere that we want as long as we border the realm, but here's the thing. We're not using sanction loopholes in order to do the war for Baghdad. We can just do that as a clan anytime we want. We're using sanction loopholes so we can buy claims to vassals that we'll be getting from taking Baghdad. We can buy claims to land and then revoke it like taking on tyranny. We have to revoke quite a few titles this run, and we don't want to end up needing to constantly take tyranny every time. So sanction loopholes is quite useful. It's also useful for a potential stretch goal, you could say, for this run, where you can claim the Byzantine Empire before you become the Arabian Emperor, but that's something which only happens on the most optimal of runs. It's difficult to find an opportunity to claim the Byzantine Empire than actually fight for it in a run that has this much RNG in it, so I wouldn't recommend necessarily relying on that. Your ability to actually defeat the Abbasids in this initial war for Baghdad is actually kind of questionable. It'll depend on how strong the Abbasids have been throughout the run and how much time you took to prepare before fighting them. I find that in most runs the Abbasids aren't strong enough to resist me if I've taken the time to max out my men-at-arms. In some runs though, the Abbasids can remain quite powerful, and in other runs they completely collapse. We don't actually want them to get dissolved though. We don't want them to be so weak the empire goes away, because we are going to claim the Arabian Empire using sanction loopholes later, but the reason we're taking Baghdad right away is just so that we can move our capital there. We'll move our capital there right away though, because if we do that, we'll be uninvolved in the struggle, and that will significantly reduce our income over in Iberia. What I mean by moving our capital there is we're going to do that later, once we're ready to end the Iranian intermezzo, which is going to be a little bit later from now. In the meantime, if you haven't gone sanction loopholes yet, continue to build up your domain and get more powerful, but if you already have it, buy a claim to the Abbasid Empire, and we're going to go take the empire. As a contingency plan for my run, I chose to go down the health tree first so I could live longer as my sultan. Considering that we need to build up the strength to defeat the Abbasids anyway, it wouldn't be very useful to get the sanction loopholes perk and then have to wait to get strong to beat them anyway, so I chose to be healthy. I was sort of punished for this because the Abbasids turned out quite weak in my run, and I probably could have taken the Abbasid Empire right away, but it works out either way. I personally highly recommend going health first because the first Sultan is a pretty good character, and also because it gives you more time to build up your realm in a relatively safe location. The first Sultan is powerful enough and well liked enough that he won't have any problems with civil wars or anything. In my particular run, I chose to use the downtime while I was waiting for sanction loopholes to attack the Byzantine Empire. What you choose to do in your downtime will depend on what is sort of the place with the least resistance. So for me, the Byzantine Empire was quite weak, but in your run, if they're very strong, you might want to go focus on Persia first. One little detail which for me complicated the run quite a bit, but which I figured out a way to get around, is that the Abbasid Might achievement requires you to end the intermezzo in such a way that it would destroy the Persian Empire. This actually causes Darius' Revenge to become impossible because the Persian Empire stops existing. You can sort of get around this by just making the Persian Empire before getting the Iranian intermezzo ending, and that can be difficult, to say the least, purely because of how many little realms there are there. But you can sort of work your way east while you're waiting for the sanction loopholes to fight the Abbasids. So basically you have two directions you can go while waiting. You can either focus on the Byzantines, or you can focus on Persia. Either one is fine, because any conquest that you do is contributing towards your ability to finish the run, as long as you're doing something. What you want to avoid in a run like this is simply idling. Idling will waste time, and it will also waste your character's life. Every time your character dies, the game gets a little bit harder, because you're going to have less time to finish the intermezzo due to the intermezzo slowly coming to an end, and the AI will have more time to get more powerful. You want to pounce on the characters while they're weak. In my run, I wanted to save piety because I realized that I was going to be doing a lot of holy wars in the near future, and I decided to swear fealty to the Abbasids and then to fabricate a claim on their throne using the meritocracy perk. This is something which I wouldn't necessarily always recommend that you do. It can usually be easier just to conquer the empire using sanctioned loopholes, but for whatever reason, I think this run I also was a bit tired after 8 hours of streaming, and I chose to do something a little bit different. This is what I mean about the run being sort of improvisational and having contingency plans. There are many different ways you can go about this. We need the sanction loopholes because we're going to want to be revoking a lot of land, and also because we're going to want to buy claims to countries in the east in Persia, but at the same time we also don't need it because you can just use meritocracy. Simultaneously, the scholarship tree actually is super good, so it's a toss-up. There's many different ways you can handle this achievement. I chose to go down the meritocracy route, but you can kind of do whatever you feel like, as long as you become the Arabian Emperor at some point. I would say that overall, the best advice I can give is to take the time that you need to prepare before doing these big moves. I'm about to become the Abbasid Emperor in this upcoming clip, and if I'm not ready for that, I'll clearly just get overthrown and I'll lose all my stuff and the run will pretty much be killed. But if I took the time, which I did take the time to do, to build up my domain and to get strong, I can actually handle it. I'm converting to Azarika immediately because I want to revoke land from the Caliph. Despite taking over the Arabian Empire, the Caliph still is a vassal of the realm, and I have to become the Sunni Caliph in order to get the Umayyad Strikes Back achievement. It's pretty easy to revoke land for someone if they're hostile to you religiously and you're a fundamentalist. So I became Azarika. I'm not planning to stay Azarika, obviously, because I gotta become Sunni again, but Azarika is a nice tool to use. As well, if you have high learning, a lot of your vassals will convert with you, and that'll make it easier to maintain their loyalty compared to if you're sort of the wrong faith. Even though Muladi is righteous, you're still wrong faith technically, and it'll help you rule the realm a little more simply. You'll also notice that I did immediately convert back to being Sunni, and that's just because I don't want to have any rebellions from the people that I'm ruling over. Azarika is fundamentalist, like I said before, and that means you're going to have a lot of peasant rebellions all the time, because I haven't converted like any land to being Azarika, so I just go back to being Sunni. This also was to keep some of the Sunni vassals that I have who weren't rebelling against me at the moment away from rebelling against me. The crime of rising up against their lord was already enough that I could revoke everything I need from the various people that rebelled in this war. It can certainly be scary to fight these big civil wars, but the secret to winning them is to focus on destroying armies before they can group up, and to have a capital that's very out of reach. So my capital is still all the way back in Cordoba, which means that they're not going to get there. They'd have to take boats all the way across the Mediterranean to get there, and if they were to do that, that leaves their entire country open to me. So it's pretty easy just to hunt down the small armies before they can unify and then win the war pretty quickly. You also should occupy the capital of whoever it is that is the leader of the war. In this case, that would be the Caliph, whose capital is in Damascus. And that's because you get 10% bonus war score from occupying the capital of the war leader, and you have a chance of capturing the war leader in that siege, which immediately ends the war. Once I finished civil war, I was able to revoke everything from the Caliph because his capital was outside of the region required for the Iranian Intermezzo. So one special little thing you'll notice if you ever try to revoke all the Caliph's titles, if he's involved in the Iranian Intermezzo, you can't revoke his last county. You're just not allowed to, because he'll say it'll make him no longer exist. He's needed for the Intermezzo, but if he moves his capital outside of there, he's no longer involved. In my case, his capital was in Damascus. This is most of the reason why we actually take Baghdad. Taking Baghdad early is good because it's a good county, that's one thing that's very true, but it's also because we're hoping the Arabian Emperor will move his capital outside the Intermezzo. This allows us to revoke all his titles and do any shenanigans. If you don't get him to move his capital outside of the Iranian Intermezzo's region, then you end up having to basically release him as independent count, then county conquest him and take his last county that way. It's a little bit more complicated, but this way is much simpler. This will cause a vacancy in the Sunni Caliphate, which we can then fill by becoming Sunni and creating the Sunni Caliphate again. At this point, you are now the Emperor of the Arabian Empire and the Sunni Caliph, which gives you the achievement the Umayyad Strikes Back. We've still got a bit more to do though. Let's talk a little bit about what we have to do in order to get the renewed caliphate. So we have to make sure that there are no detractors of the caliphate, even within our sub-realm. We have to control the entire Arabian Empire, and we have to have there be no non-Sunni faith characters in the Persian Empire region. This is a lot to ask for, and the thing is that you could go about this by trying to diplomatically change the stances of the detractors of the Caliph into being supporters, but because this decision will destroy the Persian Empire and we still want to get Darius' revenge, we're actually going to handle this in a much more warlike way. We're just going to conquer all of the Persian Empire so we can create the title, and then we can go and conquer the things that we need for Darius' revenge. That means that we're going to ignore most of the special mechanics that the Caliph gets during the Iranian Intermezzo. It also means that we're going to be doing a lot of warring, and at this point your character might be getting kind of old, so if you've accomplished all of this within your first Sultan's life, I'd say you can consider yourself pretty much good to go. This Sultan has done a lot of great things, and it's ready for him to, pass on to the next life and leave it to the next heir. Focusing on who your heir is going to be is pretty important. You want someone who has high diplomacy and high stewardship, I'd say. You're going to be big enough, you're not going to worry about Marshall because you're just such a massive empire, you're going to have a big army no matter what you do. The diplomacy is important to keep the empire together because you might be losing a lot of people to rebellions if you don't keep the empire together. And the stewardship is important so you can keep your income high enough to be able to support this massive army. Income is very important also because we need to be able to send gifts to people to get them to stop being detractors later, once we actually need to convert our sub-vassals to not being detractors. I'm skipping ahead to where my Sultan has passed away, and that's mostly because the rest of this run is just conquest. This is where I'm not going to have a lot to say, and this is going to happen in a lot of the runs that involve a ton of conquest. What advice can I give you in order to conquer faster? Well, use your invasion CB, get prestige through grand tours and grand weddings, and manage your succession well. I chose to play as a very young character, in fact a child, purely because they were just a really good character. Even though children can be risky to play as, ultimately really good characters are worth taking the initial turmoil. So I'm playing as a child here, and they're a diplomacy focus. I want a lot of diplomacy so as to reduce the chances of rebellions. This is something that I was keeping in mind because I was streaming for the past 8 hours and I was getting a little bit tired, so I don't have as much energy to focus on putting down big rebellions. Whereas for you, you might want to focus more on something like Marshall, just so you can have a larger army to do more wars at once. months, since you'll have more focus available. This will depend on what your personal preference is. I like to have big diplomacy numbers when it comes to big empires, but you might not. The other thing you should be doing throughout this run, since we needed this for both the Fiscal Responsibility and for Darius Revenge, is you should be making a hybrid with Persian culture and making sure to take the Iranian heritage. The Iranian heritage is obvious for Darius's Revenge, since we need to be an Iranian character for that, but the other part of becoming a hybrid with Persian is to get the various cultural traditions that they have, which give us more tax collectors. Getting 5 tax collectors is a little bit tough this early on in the game. It's easy to do if you have a good vizier, but as a nice backup, it's nice to have the various cultural pillars that the Persian culture has to help with that. I've skipped ahead again to the point where I've actually gotten enough land to make the Persian Empire, and this is another transition point where now we have to go and conquer the Byzantines. This is because of Darius' Revenge, like I mentioned before, and again, conquest is so simple, I'm not going to bother explaining. The rest of this run really is just that simple. I'm going to start explaining more about what to do when we get to actually getting the Abbasid Might achievement. Here's some footage of me conquering the Byzantines. Again, it's very, very easy. By this point, you should be extremely powerful. And if you're a high diplomacy character like I am, you don't have to even worry about any, dissolution factions or whatever might come your way. You should be relatively safe. Alright, I'm skipping ahead here to the point where I've conquered basically every piece of land that I need to in order to get the Abbasid Might achievement. And now I just need to get the detractors to become supporters. This is pretty simple if you have a high diplomacy character. If you don't, it gets a bit harder. Basically, first you're going to demand everyone convert so that everyone that's not your religion is your religion, so they like you more. Then, you're going to hit the join my side button and hope they accept. If they refuse, then kill them, or revoke their titles, or get rid of them in some way, and then try again. Just do this basically until you have everything that you need. There's an opportunity for 2 bonus achievements here, by the way. These are very minor ones, but they're still useful to get. You can get trapped in the web very easily at this part by just demanding submission on supporters of the Caliphate before you end the Iranian intermezzo. You do that 3 times, then you get the Trapped in the Web achievement. Then later on, after we've ended the intermezzo, you can grant the Caliphate to any vassal you have a strong hook on, and that will get you above God. Those are just 2 little bonuses you can get pretty easily. While we're waiting, I'm going to explain how to get the Fiscal Responsibility achievement, which can be a little bit difficult if you don't understand what exactly to do. The ability to be a tax collector is basically based on the opinion of the liege and then the sum of all stats, but learning is worth double. So I don't know why it's learning and not stewardship, but for whatever reason, it's learning. So basically, the way that I always do it is I just have a bunch of sons who I educate in the learning trait, and I hope that they're geniuses and just make sure that they're really good learning characters. Or you can just keep on inviting tax collectors over and over again, hoping to get excellent ones as you go. One thing which I didn't know about until later, which this would have been very helpful, is that your vizier increases the proficiency of your tax collectors the more power the vizier has. I didn't even know that. So I managed to get 5 excellent tax collectors without a vizier. That's actually really impressive looking back. I'm not sure how I did that. For you, the best thing to do, unironically, is to get a super good vizier and then make them have a lot of power in the realm, and then just appoint 5 tax collectors who are reasonably good and they should be excellent. That's the easiest way to do it. Getting extra tax collector slots is pretty easy if you have a good vizier. If you took the Persian cultural traditions, then you'll have a lot of slots, and you can even get 1 more by getting legalistic off of the Greeks if you really need it. Regardless of what you do while waiting for the time to pass, once you get all of your vassals to stop being detractors, which might take some time. You might have to spend some time killing people and revoking titles and all that. Once you get that done, you can end the Iranian intermezzo with a renewed caliphate and get yourself Abbasid Might, while being an Umayyad, which is kind of ironic and why I put these achievements together. It's important to have a little, stylistic flourish, I think, in these kind of achievement runs. Don't forget to immediately grant the caliphate to any of your vassals on whom you have a strong hook for that Above God achievement. Now we're going to focus on Mulct Them Dry, which is the last part of this run, and this one is a little bit of an exploit type thing. It's not really quite an exploit, more just an abuse of a poorly made mechanic, let's say. I stole this strategy from very famous Crusader Kings 3 Giga Chad, Dr. Sandwich, who basically found a way to exploit the way in which viziers generate extravagances. And I don't really know how it works. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I really don't know how it works, okay? I just know how to copy it and do it. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for you to look at the original video where Sandwich does it. He doesn't explain in the video, he also just performs it. But I really don't know how to explain this. It kind of just works. Let me take you through it step by step. First of all, you've got to appoint a vizier, obviously. Then you have to give them 5,000 gold. That's so that they can actually get the extravagances. Then we're going to start doing pilgrimages and then canceling them. Every time you do a pilgrimage, you're going to enter a regency. I don't know why this happens, but whenever you enter a regency, the cooldown for your vizier to generate an extravagance goes away. But it doesn't happen right away. It's like the cooldown proactively stops. I don't know how to explain it, but the event doesn't happen. It's just that it can happen much quicker. It's so confusing. But basically, just look at the video and look at what I'm doing and copy what I'm doing. You're going to see me start a pilgrimage, then convert to different religion to cancel the pilgrimage, wait until I'm back home, then pilgrimage again, and then again cancel the pilgrimage over and over again. To be safe, I always do this about 25 to 30 times, but there's only 20 extravagances to steal, so you have to do it a minimum of 20, but I don't like to take the risk, so I do it like 25 times. You do that, and then you unpause and watch the Vizier as he gains the extravagances. Once he has 4 illustrious tier extravagances, you can mulct him, and you get a crap ton of money back, and you also get the achievement. That's how it works. I don't understand it. It just works, okay? That's 5 of the hardest Legacy of Persia achievements achieved in one playthrough. You definitely can split these up into multiple playthroughs if you want to, but as I said in the beginning of the guide, I really want to do like a low percent type run, where you do as few runs as possible. So this ended up being a really fun run to do. It snowballs really strong, and it's really fun to do, but it has a bit of difficulties at first. Next, we're going to look at a classic achievement. Let's take a look. That was my very ironic Unholy Alliance run, as I named it in my speedrun splits, so called because I achieved the Abbasid Might achievement as the Umayyads. It's a little bit of a cursed setup. If you enjoyed that video, please do check out the all achievement guide in the description, and come to my Twitch streams to watch these kind of things live. Thank you for your time.